For the first time ever, I think it really clicked in my head that personal branding is a really powerful asset to push your career forward as an entrepreneur, as a founder, to help build a foundation.
Phil Ossai. So this guy, he's generated over 100 million views for his clients.
I actually hated personal branding for the longest time.
He's worked with some huge names like Spencer Matthews.
I started to create content. I think within 3 months, I had a quote unquote viral post on the platform. Off the back of that, people started to reach out to me and say, Phil, what you've just done for yourself there, can you do that for me?
I just been lucky enough to spend the last hour with him talking about all the lessons he's learned, things to do, things not to do. Spoke about his new project. You just have to see it.
We're trying to change people's association when they come across your name, face, profile, and in this case, content.
So Phil, take us back to how did you get into personal branding and what led you to starting OSSAI?
It's a funny story, to be fair. I actually hated personal branding for the longest time. I remember, I've always been in the world of social media and creating content. I can go way, way back to my teen years where I ran a fashion brand for like 5 years. But to kind of bring back to personal branding, I was never really a fan of it. I always liked to be behind the camera, and that was how all my my projects and my businesses were set up. I spent time creating clothes or creating memes or helping shoot music videos. But the common thing was no one knew me. It was always the brand I was building. Then coming around the time of 2021, I kind of made a bit of a pivot into more corporate per se work. And for the first time ever, I think it really clicked in my head that personal branding is a really powerful asset to have to push your career forward and to, as an entrepreneur, as a founder, to help build a foundation. And we were literally talking about this the other day, how, there's something powerful about being able to generate attention. So we can kind of go into that more later. But OSSAI kind of came through my dibbles and dabbles on LinkedIn and using it kind of like a bit of a journal. And I just started to share my thoughts. I'd read a book and then, transform that into a post. And this is 2022 we're talking. So 2021, 2022 before ChatGPT. So back then I was like a magician. I started to create content. I think within 3 months, I had a quote unquote viral post on the platform. And off the back of that, people started to reach out to me and say, Phil, what you've just done for yourself there, can you do that for me? And of course, in typical Phil fashion, I'm like, yeah, of course, I'll sort this out. And I actually had to figure out, wait, what did I just do? And I went down that rabbit hole and I was like, okay, this is personal branding, or more specifically, I'd say a corporate form of personal branding, helping founders build attention to help that convert into, of course, business and opportunities. And then, I took the full time leap of leaving my job in March 2022, and we've been running ever since. So yeah, I guess it kind of started from a hatred of wanting to put myself in front of the camera and letting people know about me, and to realizing how powerful of an asset it is.
Cool, very cool. LinkedIn must have been very different back then, because one of the questions I was going to ask you was, what do you think of the state of LinkedIn now? But now I'm curious, compare it to back then. How has it evolved? And, what do you think of the state of LinkedIn now?
Man, it has changed a lot. It has changed quite a bit. 2 reasons. First part is, of course, the elephant in the room is AI. ChatGPT absolutely changed the game for everyone, and it kind of became the great equalizer in terms of being able to hit quantity and, in my opinion, in certain ways, quality as well. And then I'd also say back then, people weren't as pro putting their face out onto the internet in a business point of view. So that was really new. I'd say the state of LinkedIn right now, it is definitely very much a microcosm of the state of the economy, the state of business right now. There's a lot of uncertainty. People are unsure where things are going. We are seeing, of course, a bit of an AI bubble in the wider sense, but then also how that presents itself on LinkedIn. Everything is being generated with AI support, or the majority of things I'm seeing is AI supported. So we're talking, from a solo entrepreneur working in their backyard all the way down to, top executives at public companies. Everyone's using support of some form. And then I'm sure we're going to go deeper into that. I think the challenge I'm seeing, or the worries I'm seeing with LinkedIn right now, is number one, I love them as a platform and as an organization, but they're leaving a lot of gaps on the table in terms of not encouraging a video first approach. There isn't much discoverability to the level that you see on TikTok and Instagram, for example. Like, as the time of this recording, I think Instagram maybe this week just released a new feature to allow you to do reposts, very similar to Twitter retweets and TikTok reposts. There's not as much encouragement from LinkedIn's functionality to encourage new people to discover you, which I think is the biggest problem with LinkedIn. Is they're not exactly a creator first platform. They cater to the businesses and the advertisers above that. So I think that's a bit worrying, and I don't know how, anytime soon that will potentially change. We're in a big state of uncertainty, but I'm seeing pockets of positivity coming out of that.
Interesting. So if the discovery functionality isn't there right now, what should the, average LinkedIn user that's trying to grow their brand do? How can they get discovered more? Like what should they be doing to, I guess, just overcome the lack of functionality?
I think we can take this from a, I guess, tactical point of view and more of a philosophical point of view. Philosophical side of things, it's reminding yourself that we're playing the long game here, and branding, personal branding, the word branding is to remind you of the long-term play in this. We're trying to change people's association when they come across your name, face, profile, and in this case, content. And I always like to use the analogy of creating content on any platform or just sharing some form of medium is very similar to how TV programs work. BBC will always be on at 7 p.m. or whatever time you watch it, and you just have that confidence that it's always going to be consistent. You've got to view creating content the same way. The moment you drop off, and listen, I'm guilty of it. The first person to hold my hands up to that. That lack of consistency can make people, number one, the platforms won't show you as much because they know you're not consistent, but people's mental association of, hey, it's a certain time of the day. If I go onto LinkedIn, will I see your posts? That's the first thing, I guess, to kind of help overcome that feeling of the functionality and the machines against you. And then the second part, which I'm sure we'll go deeper into, is you just need a strategic framework. And I'm sure there's millions out there. Everyone's got their own approach and I guess style of how they create their frameworks. But the key thing that it should all translate to is you should have a daily, weekly, and I'd say monthly to-do list in relation to your personal brand, from content creation to looking at your the analytics and the numbers. All of this should just come back to what is happening during a certain time frame to help push things in the positive way.
Cool. Love that. So why don't we talk a little bit about who you're working with? Because you've got some really well-known public figures under your client roster. And then I would love to just understand, how you're finding the state of LinkedIn for their accounts right now. What kind of success are they having? What wins are you finding? And any just learnings that you would like to share with those large accounts, from those large accounts.
Yeah. As I say these names, I promise you not, this is not even to make myself sound like I'm this amazing individual. I'm just a very lucky guy that has rubbed shoulders with some really cool people that just so happen to have their name in the news. So in terms of the clients I think I can shout about, we are working with Jake Humphrey, who used to be on BT Sports, now runs a really good podcast called High Performance. We're working with Mary Earps, who was England Lionesses goalkeeper, and she plays for PSG at the moment. Working with Fern McCann, who used to be on The Only Way is Essex. Now she's pivoted into the mental health AI space with her partner Laurie, and they're working on an app called Shara. We are also working with very recently Spencer Matthews, who is again former reality star in Made in Chelsea, and now he's just, in my opinion, he's a genius. This dude just has near David Goggin levels of resilience. He does ultra marathons. He holds the world record for the most consecutive marathons run on sand. I think he did 30 marathons in 30 days to raise money for a charitable cause. Try to think if there's anyone else I can actually say. Say they're the main ones. They're the main ones. So these are big names, big personalities. A lot of it comes with, you know, you can imagine attention to detail with every post, every letter, you know, in a post, and just making sure we can make them look as good as possible.
Where did you meet these people? Because they are big names. So were the inbound leads? Did you meet them in person?
Honestly, man, I wish I could say I DM'd Fern McCann, Mary Earps, and they just replied, but it's to give a bit of a interesting story behind how I met everyone. Everyone actually stemmed from a decision I made at 16. And that decision was to start a streetwear brand called Triple B. I started this fashion brand, and I remember very vividly thinking when I stopped the brand 5 years later, so I was around 21, oh, this is a bit of a failure because yeah, it bought me a few drinks when I was at uni. But in terms of, you know, financial goals, I don't think I really hit them. But I met a few key people along that journey, and there's one individual that I did meet that we're still really good friends till this day. And through, you know, me going on my path and journey with OSSAI Agency, he went down his path, and we reconnected maybe 2 years ago or a year ago. And yeah, that person kind of introduced me to the right contacts to be able to meet all these people. So I first met, I'd say, Jake was probably the main one that I started with, and then from Jake, a lot of that was word of mouth. Then there's another person that I met again in my personal network that, to be fair, the way he met Fern was, and this is a lesson for everyone, he's just really ballsy. Excuse my language. He is just he just puts himself out there, and I think he saw her at an event and just said, "You look interesting. I want to get to know you." And he just, you know, and he started speaking to her, and then he did the introduction there. So it was essentially a bunch of introductions. And it was from people that had been monitoring me for years and years and years, from, you know, through the content I was posting on LinkedIn. It was posts where I only have like 5 likes, and I thought, oh, you know, it was a waste of time. I spent 20 minutes writing this, no one's read it. But out of the 20 people that might have saw it, one of them was, you know, Mary Earps's manager, or sorry, agent. And then, you know, another person was someone that works with Jake and all these large, you know, talent brands on a daily basis. So I guess that's how I met them in tactically speaking. But I think the biggest key takeaway that I hope people can take from this is keep consistent, because you don't know who's looking at your content. And the people that are looking at your content are seeing it from a, you know, a completely different perspective from you. So yeah, long story, that's how I met everyone.
No, it's cool. I mean, it's also making me think of community. Like you've built this community outside of LinkedIn and brought them to LinkedIn, or at least just nurtured them with LinkedIn. And I mean, that's like you did that with me too, kind of in a way. Like I met you in the mailroom at West Towers. I think I was on the phone or something, and you're like, I don't know what you said, but you reached out to me, and then we connected, and I think we went to the gym and stuff, and then we connected on LinkedIn, and well, here we are, like 2 years later, 3 years later. So I think it's a really good thing, and I think, you know, building community outside of LinkedIn is a huge amplifier, and I know that's something that you're a big advocate of as well. So I think on one of the other podcasts I listened to, the line that you said was content produces conversations that build community. Or maybe I'm misquoting, you can correct me, but can you speak more to that?
Spot on, by the way. That's I guess my, remember when I said earlier I used to share these mental models. I think that was one that really stuck with me and kind of formed the basis of the framework around OSSAI Agency. Through creating these posts, sharing these, you know, streams of consciousness, essentially, that started to make people talk. So I had a lot of people online talking, so comments, DMs. But in my world, and I think again, the way I've approached my personal branding strategy with my agency is quality over quantity. It's larger names, and individuals that you kind of need to have introductions towards. So those offline conversations was gold dust for me. If I was to kind of calculate the percentage of clients that I've got now, 95% of them have come through someone very close within my community that's either recommended me, introduced me to someone, or the work I've done from one client has caught the attention of another client. And then, that's how the work is coming. In the earlier days, it was very much inbound. It was create a post, get a lot of views, people would reach out to me. Challenge I faced with that was a lot of it wasn't actually qualified. These people weren't, I guess, the best match for me, and the agency at the time. But right now, it's OSSAI is so community led, and that's literally the way we try to take things.
I think it's the best way. I was going to bring this up later on when we speak about your new project, but I think it's relevant here now. When I talk to my clients, a big thing I say is, like you're really just saving time working with me. Like we are, we'll help you save time, and you should spend that building community. Because I think a lot of founders, they come onto LinkedIn, they post content, they stay consistent, like you say, but they don't do anything other than that. They just post, and I think you're really missing a trick there. Like there's so much more to building a good brand, and I'd love to ask you, how you view that, and if someone's using, let's just say AI or using your services, like what should they be doing outside of that? Like you've got the content created for you now. What else should you be doing with your time
That's a
to help your personal brand?
question. I love that thinking because now we're talking about the holistic approach to personal branding. Because the definition I use for personal branding is it's what people think and associate you with when they come across your name and face. It's deeper than just your content. Like we've talked about, opportunities can happen in person. A lot of conversations are happening about us in rooms that we're not in. That's your personal brand. So the content side is definitely a big part, and we'll go deeper into that. But I definitely recommend having time to map out who you can provide value to. So spending time building your network in the sense of the question I tend to ask myself on the weekend is, if I could, positively impact 100 people, where would those people be, and who could help me, introduce me to those people? And we had the chat the other day about how much value there is in your network. I'd definitely say that's a big thing to focus on, is actively looking to connect and meet new people. I'd then also say another thing to do, especially if you're in the visual space, and this might be a bit left field for a few people, but I've been definitely exploring the idea of visual branding too, whether it's, the typical one everyone thinks of is the colors in your carousel, but can you be known for dressing a certain way, or, speaking a certain way and using certain phrases? As silly as it sounds and as manufactured as it sounds, this is actually very common practice in
Yeah.
organizations, but public figures as well. And that's probably stuff I've
Mhm.
learned quite a lot from my clients. Is there is a lot of prep that goes into a podcast, or an appearance on TV that you don't see, and a lot of it comes down to having a solid strategy outside of just the words that you're saying. It's how you're saying it, how you look while you're saying it, and then who are you saying it to, mentally, who you thinking you're speaking to. So those would be the key three things I'd say.
I don't think it's silly. I think it's actually really smart. I mean, you see, like in like the tech world anyway, you see people like Iman Gadzi. He's got like the old money style look.
Yeah.
You've got Alex Ramosi, the lumberjack T-shirt, mustache. Like you recognize those figures because of how they look. You could probably grey out their entire picture and you'd still notice them. There's someone else I saw on LinkedIn the other day, and he wears a cowboy hat. In recruitment, but he wears a cowboy hat, and it's like it stands out so much, right? You'll recognize them all day long. And it's probably more prominent with the people you work with at that caliber, and like because they're all like TV personalities, and or they've been on TV to some degree. So it's probably a lot more of a thing in that realm as it is to like B2B tech or whatever. But I do think B2B tech, or even just like SMBs, could borrow some of those concepts and apply. So I don't think it's silly. I think it's a really cool point. What are you gonna do? What's gonna be your thing? You're not gonna grow a mustache, are you?
Nah, not yet. I mean, I kind of look a bit overgrown at the moment because of the work I've been up to recently. But for the longest time, it was a white t-shirt. I'm not actually wearing one today, but I used to wear a white t-shirt a lot. I think my photos were always in the elevator. Random thing, people were asking for, "Hey, Phil, are you not like in the lift? Are you not in the office today?" That was a funny comment I used to get a lot. So I'd say that was a big thing, was the white tee, cargos, and yeah, being in an elevator.
Yeah, I'm also looking for my thing. I don't know what it'll be. I don't think it's something you can force though either. Like you have to explore it, right, and then it sort of falls into place, which is probably like everything in personal branding. Like you can't force content. You've got to explore ideas, right?
Definitely. You know, Gary Vee has that phrase, you know, document, don't create. I feel like there's truth to that. Just try your best to just put a camera into your world rather than sit down and over manufacture things, because people will see through it. We all see it. And then also, you just had to give me a bit of a flashback. I had a content strand on LinkedIn quite a while ago where I would kind of connect and everything we've just been discussing in terms of how does person branding, expand beyond just the content. Funny enough, I would meet people off back of content, have a genuine conversation. Like we've been catching up quite a lot this over the last couple of weeks. I'd take a photo with them, and then the hook was, if you were a fly on the wall in this conversation, here's what you would have heard. And I genuinely was making notes when meeting these people, and I'd share the notes verbatim into the post. So theoretically, that was probably the quickest, most efficient content strand I've created, because I literally just had to copy and paste the templated hook with my diary notes and just taking the photo with someone and getting on with my day. And that worked wonders for number one, positioning. I looked like I was definitely, a leader in my space. And then it kind of led to me meeting more people, because again, I use that network effect to try and get through. So yeah, you just made me think of that.
Yeah, that's smart. I like that. You made me think of like what content do you create for your clients that typically sparks meaningful conversations? So there's a lot of content on LinkedIn right now that could be considered fluff. What's the conversations or the content that creates conversations?
That's a really good question. So, meaningful conversations for probably 99% of people that would be listening to this, and myself included, is a conversation that leads to some form of business, right? And we have to kind of reverse engineer that process from the sale. And if you think about most sales that you'll, be able to close, it tends to be that you are trying to take someone from point A to point B. So the content that leads to that is showing people evidence that you've led someone from point A to B. So case studies works really well. But again, the case study not being grounded in, hey, this is such and such, and here's all the stats, but you can add a bit of a story, add a bit of your element to that. I'd also say having contrarian takes can work really well. Personal branding, for example, as an industry, has quite a lot of cowboys, no pun intended. You mentioned the guy with the cowboy hat before. And all these individuals tend to promise one thing and not actually be able to deliver on that. So if I, as a personal branding leader, can, give a bit of a hot take that's a bit different from how other people approach things, that instantly makes me stand out, because, I'm going against the grain there. So contrarian takes, case studies work really well. I'd also say another one that works well is, we normally use the word personable content, talking about yourself and your life, but I'm going to kind of put a bit of a spin and evolve that and call it more just human content and humanizing yourself. Because when you humanize yourself, you become more relatable. And then number one, the post is more relatable to a wider audience, so you'll get a lot more views. And then number two, it then also connects those people to you, like they're now aware of you. I know you got a very clever framework around that, the concept of getting people to know you and then getting people to like you. I think that's really cool, man. So
That's
I'll
good.
I'll give an example. So with Spencer, we recently just launched his LinkedIn. So sorry for the cheeky plug, Craig, but he hit one of his posts that I strategically recommended to put together for him was a post about essentially work-life balance. And him as a father, I think that the hook was along the lines of, he knows lots of people. So he knows a bunch of CEOs where their kids don't call them dad, they call them by their first name, because dad doesn't connect with them, it doesn't register. In other words, they're just not present parents. And that's super relatable to both of us as fathers, that are founders. We don't we don't want our kids to not think of us in a
Yeah, that's deep. I don't know how I would feel with my son calling me Craig. Like,
but yeah, so that's widely relatable. You guys are not in the same industry, not the same location, but it connects. That's a story that connects. That's a human concept versus personable, which is more about here's what's happened in my world and here's how I've overcome that, which was definitely a framework that works well a while back. But now it's about, can you make the content relatable to a wide number of people? And it doesn't even have to be about yourself, but it's something that people can relate to. So to summarize, case studies, showing people contrarian takes, hot takes, and going against the grain. And then the third one is the more humanized content.
cool. Okay, so that leads me on to AI. But before we go into AI, I think a nice bridging question, which touches on what you just spoke about, like to think of these ideas, to think of, like, because everyone's so busy, right? They're just trying to get through the week. It's really hard sometimes to stop and think about what you've just done that's interesting, and also like what's interesting to you might not be interesting to anyone else, but something that's not interesting to you could be interesting to the masses, right? So um if the average founder, say they have like an hour a day for LinkedIn, that's probably generous to be fair. But let's say they have an hour a day on LinkedIn and it takes them like 40 minutes to write. Like writing's probably not the best use of time, right? So hold that thought for a minute. How should they, use that hour? How should they, spend time ideating? How do they find these unique ideas? I'm just curious what it looks like for you and what your advice would be for the founder that's trying to work out how to write, think of ideas, think of the thing that makes them unique, question whether they should grow a mustache or whatever. How should they spend their time? What's the best use of that time?
That's a really good question. And that kind of funny enough links to the framework, the mental framework of the three C's, which has actually stood the test of time. Like it's still relevant, in my opinion, to this day. The content side, we all kind of understand and we'll go deeper into later. The conversations is where this kind of like solves this problem. So you can think of the three C's linear, but you can also think of it as a loop. The more content you create, the more conversations, the bigger the community leads to more content, and of course, more conversations. So spending time having conversations with people will, number one, spark ideas, but hopefully also give you something to go away and think about and produce something a bit more original in thought. So I generally try to encourage, I guess, two types of content, two prongs of content. The first side is something that's a bit more reactive. So being able to, I'm sure many founders, you subscribe to all the newsletters and all the latest AI news or industry news, taking time in the morning to read that and based off of anything that's breaking news, add your 2 cents to that story. I remember being picked up by a newspaper actually off the back of a article and the news about Stormzy and the McDonald's collaboration he did and a lot of the backlash he was receiving. And I read that and I thought, if I was his personal brand manager, what would I have done in that situation? And I genuinely wrote that down and then turned that into a post. And I got a bit of attention on LinkedIn, and then a newsletter picked that up. Sorry, a newspaper.
Nice.
And that is kind of an approach that I definitely recommend people to do, is to consume, to create, read, learn what's happening in your space, and then comment in a very unique way. And there is some tips on how to get that unique spin. And then I'd say the other side is your sales conversations. So whenever you're, pitching a client or a prospect, what are the challenges that they're facing that you're solving, and making mental notes of that, and then reverse engineering that into content. One thing that had been doing really well for quite a while, especially over the last year on LinkedIn, was, I'm sure you've seen them, those lead gen posts where someone will have like a zoomed out image or something on Figma where it's just so much information that's overwhelming. And they just say, comment guide below and they'll send it to you. That also works well because it's again showing that you've explained or articulated the problem that someone is struggling with and giving them the solution to it. And all they simply have to do is comment and they'll receive that. That's again showing that you are attentive to someone's needs, in challenges, and you've gone away, done that research, and come up with a solution. So people love solution-based people, and people love hearing about new news and their opinion on that news.
Very cool. Yeah, very cool. The news stuff is something I need to do more often. It's like easy content to do, but very impactful, right? I've saw some posts this week rack up like between 2 and 5,000 likes, and I know likes aren't like the beyond end all, but it's still a good signal, right?
Definitely.
What about the writing part? You know, actually writing. So if someone struggles with writing, you know, it doesn't come to them naturally. What can they do? The answer's obvious, but I want your 2 cents.
Okay, so I'll give you the non-obvious answer. I think writing doesn't come natural to many people when they are aware that there's going to be an audience to the writing. Because if you ask people to go away and journal, I'm sure there'll be less friction than if you say to someone, go write a LinkedIn post. So it's first trying to remove yourself from and detach yourself from the outcome of, hey, we're not here writing for, to go viral. We're not writing for likes or comments. We're writing to yourself and start with that process. So making notes, like I mentioned, and that can potentially turn into content later. The idea is to forget about everyone else. Once you're more comfortable and built a bit of a habit of making personal notes, which I'm sure many founders do, I don't think that's the biggest challenge. It's the conversion of those notes into something that looks pretty on LinkedIn. Again, I think the obvious answer is, of course, having some support. Technology, AI can help, a person can help. There's templates and best practices on how to write things on LinkedIn. But I think the key thing is just to forget the fact that you're speaking to the masses and you're actually just speaking to one person. And when you remind yourself of that, you're writing to the reader that's reading it in that particular moment. Of course, there's going to be multiple readers, but you're only speaking on a one-to-one basis, technically, to many people. That is how you can kind of reduce the stress and the panic around writing, because you can pitch to a founder or you can pitch to a potential business on a one-to-one basis very simply. Just think of doing that, but it's in written form, and it just so happens to be shown to many people. So that's the philosophical side of things. Focus on one person and have that person in mind while writing. It should kind of ease that posting anxiety, which is what I think we're referring to here. Then, of course, there is the AI side of things. I would like to view AI as a digital worker. And if you are given a very clear SOP on here's how to write LinkedIn content, the best practices, very likely more than not, it should produce something that, given the right input and context, should be something very close to what you would have probably said. And I like to think very much like using AI the way, a president would have a speech writer. The president will receive maybe one or two speeches and then go through it and feel like, and make changes, and then also see which one resonates the most. So the final person that approves a piece of content, regardless if it was written by, OSSAI Agency or ChatGPT, should still be you. And you should go for it with a fine tooth comb and think, is this a good representation of me, before just hitting send?
Some people are using AI in like a very terrible fashion. Some people use it very, very well. What's the difference, and how do you make sure you're going to use it to serve you best and not ruin your personal brand? I showed you the other day that guy who got so much heat for producing AI content. The first comment had more likes than the post by a long shot, which was essentially making fun of him for using AI content. So how do you stop that happening? How do you prevent that from happening?
I think from my deep dives and rabbit holes I've gone into the AI space, large language models require a lot of context. And the philosophy that everyone's, the mantra everyone's using now is garbage in, garbage out. The more context you can give the ChatGPT or whatever tool you're using about you and the context of what you're trying to achieve, it makes that process so much easier. I think if anyone's heard about this AI bubble that is kind of looming, it all kind of stems from the fact that AI can do one thing really, really well, However, the possibilities of how that can be applied in different use cases sounds really exciting. And that's where the hype is building. Currently, like I mentioned, it is a very good factory worker. If you tell it to take something from A and move it to B, or identify, a trend or analyze a piece of data, it does that very cleverly. However, it is not creative. It doesn't have a creative mind of its own. And when you look at how, for example, ChatGPT 5 or 4.5 was working, it just has billions and billions of pieces of information, and it's a predictive and algorithm essentially deciding if we use a certain letter, what should be the next letter after that, and then scale that up. It's once we write a certain sentence, what should the next sentence be? What should the next sentence be based off of the context? All this tech and nerdy speak is just to basically say, if you don't give your tool, your AI tool, enough information about you, it's gonna start hallucinating. And you might hear that word a lot when it comes to AI. It will start creating stuff on its own because it lacks that context. And because it's hallucinating, it doesn't know what it doesn't know. So you might actually not catch that. And that's where people are getting caught out with the AI-isms, as we like to call it, the telltale signs of AI, the infamous GPT long dash, technically it's an M dash. And then of course it's not X but Y sentence structure. That all of this kind of stems again to the fact that it's lacking the context to really write in your way. So I definitely like to give prompts that also include average writing, average sentence length, average word count, average I'd say like character count within a word, and then the reading grade that you want to create content for. All these are different things you've got to think about. There's a lick score, LIX, that we also encourage people using. And all of this just helps from a quantitative point of view, be able to get you to, for your tool to write content that visually looks like you. And then from the qualitative side, are you giving or feeding it enough stories about yourself? And then it's all about doing a bit for Dragon Ball Z and connecting them together. And that's where the sweet spot is. Garbage in, garbage out.
I also know, like, well, I've saw a lot of people, post content and they don't realize it's garbage though. That's the thing. Like you see ChatGPT, you mentioned some of the AI-isms. You see that sometimes on the second line it'll leave a space. Just weird. It does that. It seems to do that quite consistently. But you see people post that and they don't even take the time to edit that space. They don't take the time to go through it and remove the M dash. They could do that quite easily. It's like 5-minute job, right? So yeah, my question to you is like, what does the editing process look like?
Ooh, so my personal, I guess, AI tech stack is probably a bit different from other people. And we'll find out why in a second. But the generic best practices when I was using ChatGPT and Claude was to kind of give it a template. And we actually codified the template at the time in like JSON format, so JSON. It's just a way to really give AI a guardrail versus plain text. So I took my top 10 performing posts and a few performing posts of people within my space, and I created codified templates of them. And then I gave that to the AI tool at the time and said, this is the template to use. Here is my information, my 2 cents, combine the two. And like I mentioned to you, AI is really, really good at being able to do one simple task of replacing letters within a given template. So that was how I kind of avoided the AI-isms. They can always still slip through, and I think the way to really solve that is to, again, use tools that are a bit elevated than the regular LLM of ChatGPT or Claude. But if you can just give yourself that extra 5 minutes just to slow down and think, does this actually sound like me? And try your best where possible to prompt your AI tool to stick to this tone of voice and style that I've inputted this data into you. So I do recommend dictation when it comes to content. And again, in a pre-GPT world, that was definitely the secret sauce. A lot of people would dictate their thoughts and then turn it into content. or they'll take it from their journal and then turn it into content. And the reason it works so well is it's probably the closest to having a transcript to be speaking, and that's tends to work well. You use less fluff. It's very direct to the point. You're not using jargon that nobody uses in real life, and I think that feels more human, more relatable. So yeah, that's kind of how I'd say. Give it guardrails, and then just give it as much personalized context about what you want to write about.
Yeah, love that. I use dictation all the time. Definitely changed how I produce content. I don't know. It just you can forget that you forget you're creating content when you do it. You can just start speaking. And yeah, you waffle, but there's some good golden nuggets in that waffle, right? Why don't you talk about your new project? So you've been working very hard on something that's
Yes.
your new big thing. What is that? Tell the audience about it.
So, first of all, you can probably see by my hair, I haven't had a haircut in a while. I have literally been in these four walls, very nice walls. I'm very lucky to have top glass background. So, I have basically been working, of course, with these amazing founders and public figures for quite a while now, and as AI has kind of appeared as a wave, essentially, I for the longest was the person that didn't want to use it, and I know, especially in the UK, the UK business and like space doesn't really want to embrace AI the way the US are, and one thing I know for sure is the US is usually 2 to 5 years, depending on where we're thinking, ahead of the UK when it comes to business practices, and they're way more forward thinking and innovative. I started to view how they were using AI, and I realized, okay, I think this AI fad is gonna be here for the long term. So if you remember back when I said I started my agency in March 2022, ChatGPT 3 and the way it looks like today was launched in November of 2022, if I'm not mistaken. So I had a give or take 6 months of bliss. Everyone just thought Magic Phil, I was, and that was a lot. That was where a lot of the growth of the agency actually happened. Then when ChatGPT came out, the question then started to, or essentially, content started to be commodified. Unfortunately, that creative exercise of what we've just discussed, have a conversation with someone, digest it in your spare time, write it down on notes or dictate it, and then write something about that, had been turned into a 10-second prompt on ChatGPT. And the unfortunate thing is, it's really difficult to tell the difference now. At the start, it was so much easier. Now it's getting harder, and everyone has to remember this is essentially the dumbest AI will ever be. It's only going to get smarter. So I basically came to a realization that this AI fad is not going to go anywhere, and I'm in the personal branding space. So I need to find a way, ideally before others do, on how can we marry the two and still keep the core values of personal branding in general, and of course of my agency, which is again authenticity. It's sharing. The phrase I use is, "What's common knowledge to you is a game changer to someone else." And keeping all these values in line while still using AI. So we went away and did some deep diving and started to realize how AI works. We realized the opportunities that lie in being able to essentially have content being sourced for you, and help do all the heavy lifting without removing that authenticity. So that's where Pesora came in. So the tool that we're working on, so it's a platform called Pesora, and essentially what it does is it helps create content proactively and on autopilot for you. So the value is, you wake up, you check your email, your WhatsApp, your Slack, and you'll see a post ready for you that sounds like you. Is very likely something that's breaking news in your industry. So it's kind of combining what we mentioned, the reactive content, and giving you that 2 cents and doing it for you with that presidential feel of, you've got options in front of you, work has been put into it, you just need to pick what sounds most like you and then go from there. So we've launched, I think it was like a month ago now, and we're still trying to constantly test it, and we're technically working on the version 2 already. At the speed of AI, we have to be quick. So it's looking really good. It's really we're really focusing right now on that reactive piece. A lot of the users are benefiting from, you know, waking up to find out something that's happening in their industry, not through the internet, but on Pesora, which they find a big value use in, and trying to just make sure we can keep that hyper personalization within that. So yeah, I've been trying to avoid saying it and focus more on the you know the key things while talking to you today, but that's what we've been working on. It's been a 9 month labor of love, and yeah, really excited for people to hear more about it.
Very cool, man. Yeah, I'm happy for you as well. I've saw the tool. It looks cool. Um, I want you to just, sell it now. Like, not hard sell it, but like, tell me what makes it different. Why is it different from the other tools that people are starting to talk about creating? Um, the ones like I want to know what makes Persora shine.
100%. Okay, so let me put my sales hat on. Truth be told, everyone that's heard this is probably thinking, what's the difference between what you just talked about with Pesora and ChatGPT, and then maybe, hey, I've heard of other of your competitors recently, so why should I go with you guys? I think the key thing that Pesora is focused on is trying to digitize my brain and the playbook of OSSAI Agency, which I think is a bit different here. Not many people have worked with the names I've been able to work with. So we're trying to just share what has been working well with the big founders to all people. I'd say number two, the challenges of the AI-isms, the telltales, all of that has been ironed out with Pesora. So we're now essentially been able to create what we're calling a digi, a digital twin of you, to be able to get that personalization in terms of the phrases it uses, but then also the quantitative science of your tone of voice in terms of your reading style. So it's got that all unlock, and we've done a lot of work to be able to nail that. And then I'd also say you'll probably see a lot of value in that feeling of being able to wake up knowing there is multiple posts for you that have been created ahead of time for you to review and just post. Because everyone hates that feeling when they look at their LinkedIn or their Notion and it's empty and there are no posts, and you've got 10 minutes until a meeting starts and you don't have the mental capacity to think of a really good post in 10 minutes. That's where Pesora kind of steps in. It's meant to be that support system for you. It's not here to create content for you and then share it without your permission. It's more about, hey, I've gone away, done the content research, I've done the content writing, and I've given that to you on your Slack, your WhatsApp, your email. And it's just for you to review, copy, paste, put into LinkedIn, and you're good to go.
Very cool. Very cool. Where can people find out more?
I'd say best place is the website. So Pesora.app. So Pesora is spelled Pesora.app. That's got all the information. We all work on a bunch of courses and resources because I realized the best way to help Pesora is to technically put myself out of business and just share all that my secrets, because like we talked about, garbage in, garbage out. The more information you can have written out on paper, or the more you can think about what you want to talk about, the more you'll get out of Pesora and any AI tool in general. So I'd say that'll probably be the best starting point. Go onto the website, check out the resources, see how you can just think about personal branding in a more intelligent and efficient way. And then there'll be a trial, 7-day free trial. You can give that a go. If it works for you, great. If not, hope we can figure out something that will.
Cool. Thanks, Phil. I appreciate you coming on the podcast today. We covered some really cool points. I have so many more notes that I was writing down as we were going that I'd love to speak to you more about, but maybe one day there'll be a round two. But yeah, thanks for coming on the podcast and really appreciate it.
Thank you, man.